Good morning. Welcome to the Dauphin Island Sea Lab and our estuarium program, the Boardwalk Talks. Because we don't have the public here in person, we have an opportunity to do something a little different this morning. So we have walked across the street from the estuarium over to the lab's Marine Mammal Research Center. And we are here to chat with Dr. Alissa Deming, veterinarian with the program, and Mackenzie Russell, stranding biologist, and they are going to tell us a little bit about the marine mammal program here.
Thanks, Mendel. It's great to be here with you guys today. Dr. Deming and I are very excited to be sharing a little bit about our program. So we are going to talk a little bit today about what we do and what interesting things we can find out about the marine mammals in our area. So first and foremost, just to let you know, we want you to report any marine mammal stranding. So if you see an injured, sick, or deceased marine mammal, we do have a way that you can report those here in Alabama that allows us to do our science on marine mammals.
So first today, we're going to give you guys a little tour of our building where we actually come back and do our research once we go out in the water and either look at the live marine mammals that call Alabama here their home. The two most common marine mammals that we see here in Alabama are number one, the bottlenose dolphin, and number two, manatees. And manatees specifically come to our area during the spring and summer months when it's a little bit warmer, and then they should be migrating during the winter down to Florida so they can stay warm in the winter. But the dolphins that live here typically call this area home all year round. And by our research that we've done, we found out that the dolphins that live here are quite site-fidelic and quite homebodies. So the dolphins that you've seen here when you were kids, and if you're a little bit older and have lived in this area, are probably the same dolphins, which is really cool. So we'll be talking about some of the ways we learn a little bit about these wild dolphins and manatees that live in these waterways, as well as ways we can understand better the population health and what you guys can do to help us do that kind of research, as well as keep the animals safe that live in our water. So let's go on inside and see where the science happens. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Mackenzie. We're in our Marine Mammal Research Center building, which is right across the street from the estuarium. Mackenzie's going to tell you a little bit about what we do here with the dolphins and manatees that make their way to this building.
So now when we receive and recover a already deceased marine mammal, such as a dolphin or a manatee, we will bring them to this building and we'll be able to find out a lot more information about what happened to them during their life. So we might be able to find out their cause of death, we'll be able to find out how old they are, hopefully, which Dr. Deming will tell you a little bit more about. So this is just a great example of what a necropsy is. So again, a necropsy is an animal autopsy, and we can investigate why these animals died and what they were doing before they died. And we'll show you a little bit of the room where this actually happens. So if we come over here, this is what our necropsy lab looks like. So there are two tables in there. We have a lot of floor space, a lot of heavy equipment because these animals that we are working with are usually quite large, and a lot of great and specialized equipment that allow us to do our jobs. Now, when we're in necropsy, we try to find out a lot more about these animals and their life history, but there are a lot of other ways besides necropsies that we can find out what these animals were doing while they were alive. I'll let Dr. Deming talk about that.
So as we make the swap between this, Eliana, who's 9 years old, asks, is it hard doing this every day?
It's actually not. I feel like by trying to figure out why the animals are dying, it's the best way that we can help determine ways that policy and management people that kind of oversee the safety of the marine mammals out in the wild can implement changes that really make a difference that can help protect the population. So it's actually quite rewarding because we feel like we're doing the science that is helping lead the policymakers and the managers to help better manage the populations. Thanks. So I will say I'm a veterinarian, and just like other veterinarians that you may have come into contact with, I went to vet school and learned a lot about dogs and cats. We also learn about horses and cows and all kinds of animals. And now I kind of specialize in animals that are aquatic, so both marine mammals, fish, turtles, sea lions, stuff like that. Nowadays, most of my time is spent with marine mammals like dolphins and manatees here in Alabama. And one of the challenging parts when it comes to working with wildlife is we don't understand the history of that animal. So if you were going to bring your dog into the veterinarian, number one, they would show up for their doctor's appointment. These dolphins and manatees don't do that. So we really have to rely on the general public to give us a call and let us know when these animals are sick. But another thing is we really don't know how old these animals are, and so or what they're doing, who they're hanging out with. So we have to do a lot of science out in the field to better understand the individual lifestyles of these dolphins. But in order to do that, you have to be able to tell the difference between the dolphins. So we have a really awesome photo ID team that's just started in December, and they're out in the water taking pictures of the dolphins and seeing what they're doing in their day-to-day life. And one of the ways that they tell the difference between the dolphins is actually their dorsal fins. So as dolphins get a little bit older, you can see that the trailing edge of their dorsal fins all look very different. So we've got a group of experts that can look at these pictures and identify individual dolphins based off of the different patterns in their dorsal fins. And then they'll go out another day and take more pictures and go back and match those pictures to see if those dolphins are using the same areas, to see if they're hanging out with the same animals, and to kind of get a better understanding of what the population's doing. Now manatees, they don't have dorsal fins, so they're a little bit more challenging to tell it apart. Unfortunately, one of the things that happens with manatees quite often is they can get hit by boats. So by the time a manatee is about 2 to 4 years old, typically they've been struck by a boat that leaves some kind of scar pattern that makes them identifiable between other manatees. So you can see this picture right here showing 2 manatees, and this scar pattern right here, once we get a picture of that and identify that this animal has a scar pattern like that, if it's seen again in the future, we can see that that's the same animal. And then in animals that have actually been involved in health assessments or rescue and rehabilitation, you can see that this animal actually has what we call a tag on it. So there's a little belt right around its tail, and it's got a tag that's the equivalent of like us carrying around a cell phone. And that tag sends up signals to the satellites in order for us to track where that animal's going. And that's how we learned that the manatees here in Mobile Bay during the spring and the winter months have made their way all the way down to Florida, typically Homosassa and Crystal River area, and they spend their winters there where it's a little bit warmer, and then they'll come back up here looking for food in the summer. And I should say, Elizabeth Heeb is going to be going over some manatee stuff, our photo ID and citizen science program that we have with manatees, where if you guys see a manatee, you can call our manatee hotline, and we'll show you that number. I think we have it inside. Or actually, it's right here. And you guys may see signs like this around out on piers, and if you see a manatee and you call that number, more than likely you'll get a hold of Elizabeth, and she can keep track based off of your observations out in the water of where these manatees are going to help us better protect them when they're here in Mobile Bay. So dorsal fins are one way we identify dolphins on the water, but when we're trying to figure out how old they are, which is a really important thing to take into consideration when we're establishing their health and the things that are going on with them out in the wild, is trying to figure out how old they are. And to do that, there's a variety of ways we use. One of the more traditional methods is straight length. So that's the measurement, and if we go in here, I can show you. This is our marine mammal office, where all the action happens. If you give us a call, this is where it comes into. So we're going to show you some cool stuff we have here. So this is a dolphin, and you can see they're mammals. So they look fairly similar to us as far as all their internal organs are concerned. And they have a lot of the same bones as us too. And in a minute, we'll talk a little bit more, which is from the tip of their rostrum. Some people call this a nose, but technically their blowhole up there is their nose. So from the tip of their rostrum to the very tip of their tail is what we call a straight length. And so we have a general idea of how long a dolphin is at different age stages. So a dolphin that is a newborn baby is going to be less than 115 centimeters in length. And then when they become a toddler, so a little bit older, maybe they get up to 150, 160 centimeters in straight length. Way bigger than this. This is probably the size of a brand new baby dolphin, maybe one that's about a month old, 2 months old, and they get bigger and bigger. So human babies are typically born under 10 pounds. Dolphin babies come out at about 30 to 50 pounds, so they're much bigger than human babies. And they grow quite larger than humans as well. So an adult dolphin's straight length is going to be, at least in the northern Gulf area, we have slightly shorter dolphins up here, about 210 centimeters in length. And they can get up to about 300 to 400 pounds, so they can get really big. But that's kind of a fairly crude method to establish the age in these dolphins, just because we can only tell if they're babies, calves, subadults, or adults. And because we want to know if they're old adults or young adults, because they see different health issues at different points in their life, we have to use a more refined way. So one way that we do that is, if you guys can see in my hand here, this is a dolphin tooth that we collected from an animal that passed away. And we can basically cross-section this dolphin tooth, and kind of like trees grow layers and you can tell how old a tree is based off of tree rings, we can kind of tell how old a dolphin is based off of the rings on the teeth that they lay down throughout their life. We also have some students doing some of their graduate work to look at those specific layers and the chemical contents in those layers, and that can help us better understand what they experience throughout their life at different periods. And then we're trying to figure out some ways to more accurately estimate their age. So the teeth are really good up until about 15 years old, and dolphins can live up to about 40 years old, sometimes 50 or 60 when they're in managed care. So one way that we're trying to do this, and this is a fairly well-established method, but we're trying to apply it to the dolphins that live here, is through radiographs or x-rays of their hands and arms. And so dolphins have very different hands and arms than us. And so this is not a dolphin. This is a radiograph of a human hand and arm. So Mackenzie, put your arm up so you can kind of see. So this is looking at Mackenzie's hand and then her forearm. It's actually not her arm in this picture, but we all pretty much look the same. So dolphins kind of need to be more streamlined so they can swim through the water. So their arms got really, really short and their hands got really, really big. So these are some radiographs of dolphin pectoral flippers. So they don't have legs, right? All they have left is arms. They do have something we call vestigial legs. So they have these are the bones that are left over from their femurs. So their legs, and they're really, really tiny. They're kind of hard to find. Mackenzie's a pro at it. And their pelvic bones just lay right there where their legs would have been. So their legs have kind of disappeared over time, but their flippers are still there. So that's one way that we can age them. So this is showing different flippers of different age stages of dolphins. And I'm not sure if any of you guys have heard of this, but when you're young, you have something called growth plates in your bones. So your long bones grow, if you guys can see my pointers, from the ends of each one of these. And so as this animal ages, it lays down bone in layers, so these hands or flippers get bigger. So you can see that the one to the left is a newborn baby dolphin, still has a lot of bones to grow. The next one, you can see these growth plates have quite extended, and they've extended in a variety of places, and in this next one, all of those growth plates have closed. So there's a variety of publications that are out there, and there's one that just came out with a great equation that we can measure these growth plates at different points in their pectoral flippers, and that allows us to figure out an estimated age. So I can tell you that this one right here is probably about 1 week old, a little baby dolphin. This one here is a little bit older, maybe a teenage dolphin. Probably a teenage dolphin. They become adults when they're around 5 to 7 years old. So this one's probably about 2 to 3 years old, about a teenager in dolphin years. This one right here, one of my favorites, we nicknamed her Mrs. Pickles. Mrs. Pickles is one of the oldest dolphins that we've had through here, and she's 46 years old based on this aging technique. She had a lot of babies, and she died of natural causes. She actually had heart disease, believe it or not. So those are the kind of things that we can find out based off their radiographs and their pectoral flippers.
How precise is it? Is it to within a couple of years?
We're still trying to validate the pectoral thing in wild dolphins. It's a little bit challenging to do in wild dolphins because we don't really know how old they are. So to validate their ages, we have to come up with kind of tricky ways to do it. Our photo ID team is going to help because they'll be able to take pictures and figure out when dolphins are born. So at some point in their life, if they do show up here, then we will be able to validate it that way. But we also will age them looking at their teeth, which is a more traditional method to establish ages. And then we'll compare the ages we get from the teeth to what we get using the equation on the pectoral radiographs that we've taken. Now, there's other marine mammals besides dolphins, and occasionally we do have them show up on our beach. So Mackenzie's going to show you guys some other bones that are pretty cool of a variety of marine mammals, one of which did not show up on our beach. I can tell you that for sure, but I'll let Mackenzie go into a little bit more detail about that.
Thanks, Dr. Deming. So Dr. Deming has a really cool image that's actually going around and scrolling on her computer. So that is an MRI of a dolphin that's actually not a dolphin. So that is actually a beaked whale. So the beaked whales are very rare whales. They actually are very deep divers, the deepest divers that we have. So they go the deepest into the ocean. And that animal is actually shown right here. This is the lower jaw of that animal. But if you want to see, this is actually a 3D printed reconstruction of this animal's lower jaw. So these 2 points up here, those are actually the teeth, which is why this animal gets named a beaked whale. They've got these big old beaked looking teeth. So this is an animal that's stranded and unfortunately passed away over in Pensacola, so we were able to assist our stranding partners over there with that. But we also have a variety of other cetacean or whale and dolphin skeletons and skulls that we can learn a lot about even after the animal has passed away. So these are some great examples. This is the skull of a bottlenose dolphin. This is a very fun reconstruction, again, a 3D printed image of a bottlenose dolphin skull, where you can see all of the teeth in there as well. Now this is without the lower jaw. This is just the top part of the skull. And this right here is also another rare species. So this is what we call a pygmy sperm whale. This is a dwarf sperm whale. This is a Kogia breviceps. And they are very cool, also very deep divers related to sperm whales. Now, another species that we commonly see here, like Dr. Deming talked about, is the manatee. And this is the skull of a manatee. So manatees have very, very interesting teeth. So I'd like to show you the teeth here. And the teeth, they have something called marching molars. So as their teeth wear down at the front, they'll actually fall out. But if you see those teeth more at the back of the skull, those are newer teeth. They'll actually grow forward, and it's kind of like a treadmill of teeth. So their whole life, they'll actually replace their teeth because they're constantly chewing on grass. And finally, I'd like to show you some rib bones. So obviously, these are some pretty big differences between these two rib bones. So this is the rib bone from a manatee, and this is the rib bone from a dolphin. And if you can tell, both of these ribs have something wrong with them. So this right here is our dolphin rib, and if you see a little further down from the middle, this actually has a skeletal fracture. So that is a healed fracture. So that means when this dolphin was alive, it had a broken rib that healed. Now let's look at the manatee rib, and this manatee rib also has a fracture, but as you can see, it is not healed, and the fracture is still open. So what we know about this animal unfortunately was probably hit by a boat, and that boat probably fractured its rib before it died, and then it died from being hit by a boat. Now this little, just as our final kind of fun one, this is actually a sea lion skull. Now you guys might think, I have never heard of sea lions in the Gulf of Mexico, and you are right. So we don't have sea lions here in the Gulf of Mexico, but we got this from a really friendly group on the West Coast in California. So they were actually able to send us, and we were able to keep this sea lion skeleton. So another great example of a marine mammal skull, but not necessarily one that we have here in the Northern Gulf.
Were
are y'all ready for some questions? Because we've got lots that have come in.
We are ready.
Okay, so Tori Lambert asks, do you see the same manatees returning to this area in the summer months?
That is a great question, and you will definitely learn more about that as well later on this month when Elizabeth Heed talks about the Manatee Sighting Network. But we do see the same manatees coming here year after year, and we actually get to know them, especially when we're able to do health assessments on them as well. So we'll actually be able to tag them, like Dr. Deming talked about earlier, and follow them throughout the course of the year. So we definitely see the same animals coming back.
Crawford, who's 7, he says, this is wonderful, thank you. And he wonders if you know how fast a dolphin can swim.
Hey, Crawford, that's a really good question. Really fast. I would probably, I don't know, off the top of your head,
I have no idea.
I would say at least 30 miles per hour, if not faster. So it's interesting. I kind of tease manatees a little bit. They're not the most athletic of the marine mammals out there. Dolphins are definitely more athletic. They are pure muscle, those dolphins, and they've evolved to chase fish, and that's why they have to move really quickly, and they have so much muscle. Manatees, on the other hand, have evolved to chase seagrass, so they don't have to move quite as quickly. And as long as they can make it to an area, which is why they migrate so much, that has vast amounts of seagrass, like our beautiful Mobile Bay, they can just sit around and meander and just munch on the grass. So they're not quite as fast as the dolphins. Good question.
Does your team ever, in order to do health assessments, catch dolphins?
That's a good question, Wendell. So we do. Typically, catching dolphins can be fairly risky, so we only do it with a group of people that are incredibly well-versed and experienced in it. So we've collaborated with a group called the National Marine Mammal Foundation, and Dr. Carmichael is a co-principal investigator on a project called the Karma Project. And so the part of that project is to do health assessments on dolphins in Barataria Bay over in Louisiana. They also work in Sarasota, which is down in the west coast of Florida. And then we did our first dolphin health assessments here in Dolphin Island in 2018. And that way we can find out a little bit more about the dolphins that are still living. So it's like a dolphin doctor's appointment on the water. And we have probably a group of more than 100 people come out to do that. So we can catch those dolphins by having a team that puts a net around them, and then we'll pull them either up onto a boat or we'll hold them in the water, and then we'll do all the things your doctor does to you when you go to the doctor's appointment, probably a little bit more. We will listen to their heart and lungs. We will look at their overall skin and their body to make sure they look healthy. And then we'll do an ultrasound exam to look at all their internal organs and a number of other things. We take dental x-rays because we try and age them also from their teeth and the holes that they kind of have in the middle part of their teeth in younger dolphins can help us age them. And then another time that we often will need to get out on the water and catch a dolphin is if they're entangled. That's something we unfortunately see occasionally out here, and the way we find out about entangled dolphins is members of the public giving us a call, or our awesome tour boats, our dolphin tours that are out on the water and know these dolphins so well, will let us know if they see any animals that have fishing line or net wrapped around their flukes, and that could be a life-threatening injury. So under the guidance of National Marine Fisheries and NOAA, we communicate with them. We have a whole team of vets that kind of establish how life-threatening the entanglement is, and if we do think that that animal is at risk of passing away from that entanglement, we'll actually get a team out here, we'll catch that animal, and we'll either disentangle them and release them if they look healthy enough to handle that, or we can bring them into rehabilitation for a little bit longer of a hospital stay to get the care that they need.
So we have Haley, who's 10. She asks, where do you normally find the dolphins at?
Hey, Haley, I'm going to pass that over to Mackenzie. That is her specialty.
So here in Mobile Bay and along the Alabama coast, we see dolphins everywhere. So I can actually show you an image of where we see stranded dolphins. And stranded dolphins, actually, we see in primarily 3 what we call hot spots. So a lot of our strandings that we see, so again, those are our sick, dead, and injured dolphins, those happen on Dauphin Island, the tip of Fort Morgan, so just across the bay from where we are right now, and in Orange Beach. So those are kind of our 3 hot spots for where we see dolphin strandings, but we see happy, healthy, living dolphins everywhere, all over the bay. A lot of people actually don't know that the dolphins live in the bay, but we actually are finding out through our photo ID project that Dr. Deming talked about earlier that these dolphins live all over the coast, and like she said earlier, they are homebodies. So when they find a place that they like to live, they stay there, and they have their babies there, and their babies have their babies there. So a lot of dolphins all over.
Colleen asks, why do dolphins jump out of the water in the wild?
That is a great question. I'm going to pass that over to Dr. Deming.
Oh, I thought she was going to take that one. So there's a number of reasons why they can jump out of the water. Number one is when you see the kids doing it. So the babies love to play. Dolphins are really smart. They're really interactive. They have really good social groups. So a lot of times they're just messing around and kind of learning how to swim. So they'll breach and they'll make big splashes and they'll kind of play with each other. Sometimes it could be an invasive thing where they're trying to get away from another dolphin that may be picking on them. Typically that can happen with older males picking on younger subadults, kind of being bullies. And then also you can see a lot of action happening with both them chasing fish. They typically don't jump too much, but sometimes you'll see them fluke slap. So they'll take their tail and kind of slap the water, and you might see a fish go flying, which is really cool. Or they may be doing mating behavior. So there's a lot of action that's happening in the water when they're mating as well. And something we should note is we do have dolphins everywhere here. And if you're a visitor to our beaches, or if you're on a boat and you do see dolphins and you want to really observe what their behaviors are and maybe get a chance to see them jumping out of the water or playing or fishing or something like that, the best thing to do is to give them their space. Dolphins are really smart, and you don't want to approach them because they'll get scared away for the most part, especially if they have youngins in their group. So the best thing you can do if you want to see natural dolphin behavior and to see them jumping and playing is to kind of give them their space. We like to say about 100 yards. And those dolphins will typically continue on to their day-to-day activities, and you can really see what they're doing instead of scaring them off.
Dr. Deming, you mentioned the babies or the young ones kind of playing. I have been on the water and observed the babies sort of shadowing the mothers, or maybe it's the other way around, where they're kind of moving in a pair.
Yeah.
What is behind that behavior?
Yeah, so dolphin moms are awesome moms, and not just the moms. Groups of dolphins are kind of families typically that hang out together. So it's the moms and the mom's sisters. So the baby's aunts are often there. The sons and daughters are typically with the groups when they're younger, as well as nieces and nephews. So it's typically a family group. And just because a baby dolphin is swimming with another dolphin doesn't necessarily mean it's its mom. It could be its aunt doing some babysitting while mom's taking a break or going to get some food. But most of the time they do pair swim with their mothers. And one of the reasons why they stick close to their mothers is, number one, to streamline. So it's a little bit easier for them to swim in the water very close up next to their mom. And another thing is, because they're mammals, right? So there's a variety of characteristics to be considered a mammal. You're warm-blooded, you have hair, something that people don't realize. Dolphins are born with some whiskers on their rostrum, so they're actually born with hair. And then they give birth to live young. So they get pregnant just like we do. They have their babies in their bellies, and then that baby comes out and they lactate. So one of the things that you can see, especially if you back off and the dolphins are feeling comfortable, is those babies nuzzling underneath their moms. Typically they'll roll a little bit to their side, and the moms, the place where the babies nurse from, are actually more caudal, so closer to their tail than ours would be, closer to their arms. So the dolphins will get up in there, the babies will get up in there to nurse as well, which is really cool. And they have these little fringes on their tongues. I wish we had a picture of it, but the baby dolphins can actually take their tongue and roll it into like almost a straw, and those fringes can interlock. And the mom has skeletal muscle that helps her eject the milk, so the baby is more successful in getting mostly milk in its mouth by having a little straw and its mom helping out a little bit.
How long do they nurse?
They can nurse for up to 2 to 4 years. It kind of depends. Some of them are kind of like mama's boys, and they kind of stick around, and it depends if mom has another baby too. So if mom is having another baby, typically they'll have babies every 2 years. So they'll nurse at least for 2 years, but during the end part of that time, they're teaching the baby how to fish as well. So it will nurse and eat hard food similar to infants. And then if mom has another baby, mom will kind of teach the older one to learn how to fend for itself a little bit better so she can really focus on taking care of and giving nourishment to that newborn.
Judah wants to know why dolphins stay in groups.
Why dolphins stay in groups? Mackenzie?
Sure. So, I'm going to grab that one. Thank you. So that's a great question, Judah. Thank you for that question. Dolphins stay in groups a lot of times because, like Dr. Deming said, they're family. So a lot of the times they'll stay together because they're passing babies along, they're having, family members babysit, but also they stay together for safety. So we actually have a lot of sharks in our area, and sharks are one of the only predators for dolphins in our area. So there are a lot of sharks out there. So a lot of times they'll stay together in groups for safety, as well as a lot of socializing. So they are very social animals. They'll stick together just in order to play and eat and mate, and there's a lot of different group behaviors that they have, but they are social animals, what we call gregarious animals. So they like to be together with groups rather than on their own. And what we do actually see, which is pretty common, is two males will actually be best friends for life. So we call those male bonded pair, and those will actually, they will forever and ever, they will swim together, they will eat together, they will do all the same things together, just those two adult males, and those two, they kind of hang out with each other, protect each other, and also socialize with each other as well. So big groups, a lot of times mostly of females and their calves, and then their siblings and their calves, and then we'll also see these adult males that'll stay together in their male pair bonds.
Ellie wants to know, how old do dolphins get? You kind of touched on that, and we talked about how we age them, but just to give a general...
Yeah, good question, Ellie. It kind of depends on, their health for sure, and the health of the environment that they live in, and the quality of the fish that they're eating. And also, female dolphins live a lot longer than male dolphins, believe it or not. So female dolphins can live to about 30 or 40 years old. That's not unheard of in the wild for sure. And we've had some 40-year-old dolphins around here. Male dolphins typically about 20, maybe 30 years, but the males seem to take some riskier behaviors than the females that can oftentimes make them pass away sooner. And also, a really interesting thing with female dolphins is because they're lactating, they're able to offload some contaminants that may be building up with them throughout their life. So an adult female dolphin has a source that allows contaminants that may be building up in her blubber. When she makes that milk, it can go into her milk and unfortunately to her baby, but that decreases her contaminant load, so it keeps her healthier longer. Male dolphins don't lactate. So the male dolphins don't have a source to offload the contaminants that they may be getting from the fish that they're eating, and that can make their immune system slightly compromised or cause other health effects that also may have something to do with their shorter lifespans.
And the skull that you have on that computer back there, hold on, I gotta find it. I just lost it. Somebody asked if it was a Blainville beaked whale.
Oh, that's somebody kind of knows what they're talking about. It is a beaked whale. It is, what species is it, Mackenzie?
That is a Gervais beaked whale.
Gervais.
So not a Blainesville, but that's a great guess.
Yeah, not a lot of people know a lot about beaked whales.
There's not a lot of species of beaked whale out there either, so that's a great guess. But this is an image that we have from when that whale stranded. So that is a Gervais beaked whale. Closely related.
Stranded over in Florida?
In Pensacola.
In Pensacola. And kind of like I mentioned before, males have a tendency of having a maybe slightly harder life, and they do have to fight and stuff like that for the female's affection. So this animal, we think, died. If you can see on the very tip of his mandible, so his lower jaw, he has a healing wound right there. And underlying that wound, which we saw on CT and MRI, this may not be the best image for it, but we'll see. We could see that this animal had underlying bony reactions associated with that injury. So we'll see if it pops up. But basically, he got in a fight with another male. He hit his bottom jaw really, really hard. And then that bottom jaw became infected. And I will pause it. Oh, maybe a little bit more. And you can see the bony reaction in the bottom part of his jaw. that shows an infection, and that infection resulted in sepsis, which is basically a bacterial infection throughout your body and your blood, and that is what we think caused this whale to pass away.
It's a little hard to tell from that perspective. Could you tell us about how big that whale is?
Yeah, let's see his jaw. So this is actually the 3D reconstruction that Mackenzie showed you of his lower jaw. And we have an awesome volunteer who made this for us. He's got a 3D printer at home. He's an engineer, and he was on a mission. So he was able to 3D print this in different sections and put it back together. So this is a real life size of what that bottom jaw looks like. So he's huge.
That whale was about 14 feet long.
Yeah.
So very difficult to fit in the truck.
Can you show the hollow jaw?
Yeah. So Mackenzie can talk about this. She's a bone girl. What is that for, Ken?
Yeah, so actually all cetaceans have hollow jaws just like that, and those jaws are actually filled with what we call acoustic fat. So that is filled with fat that is specialized for them to be able to echolocate. So everybody knows, so at least if you guys don't know, you know now, that dolphins and cetaceans echolocate, and that's how they can manipulate and maneuver when they're diving looking for fish. Obviously, with beaked whales, they are very deep divers, so they dive where it is very, very dark. So they're not relying on their vision to find fish. They're actually relying more on their echolocation. So those hollow jaws are filled with fat that is actually acting as sound receptors. So they put that sound out through the top of their head, what we call their melon. They put that sound out, and they actually receive that sound back through their lower jaws and those acoustic fats, which then go to their ears.
So Charlotte, who is 8, wants to know, what are dolphin predators?
Hey, Charlotte. Well, around here, sharks, for sure. Sharks, we do see dolphins occasionally with shark bites. And I would say another, I wouldn't necessarily call it a predator, but another thing that is responsible for their death, sometimes, unfortunately, is us. So dolphins can get caught in nets, dolphins can get entangled in fishing gear, dolphins more than likely don't get hit by boats as much as manatees, but it is a risk. So it's really important when we're out in the water kind of sharing their homes to keep an eye out for these guys and make sure that we're making responsible decisions, particularly if we're fishing and a dolphin comes up on you. I know it can be quite frustrating. My dad's a fisherman, and he knows that the dolphins and the sea lions can keep you on your toes when you're out there on the water. So the best thing that we say to do if there is a dolphin in the area and you're fishing is to just pull up your fishing line, because they're always going to be a better fisherman than you, and they may just pull that fish right off your line if you do happen to catch something. But oftentimes they'll be scaring away the fish anyway because they're in the region. So you can either pull up your lines and just sit back and relax and enjoy the show they put on for you, or you can move away somewhere else and go fishing where there aren't any dolphins around.
Is ghost fishing a problem? Can you ghost fishing like with abandoned
yeah
nets or fishing?
Yeah, so there is unfortunately a lot of ocean trash out there, and these animals can get entangled in it. I would say ghost gear is more of an issue for large whales, so in the cetacean species, but baleen whales, so the humpbacks, the gray whales, the North Atlantic right whales have a major issue with ghost fishing gear. And there's a whole team of people out there that go out and try and disentangle those huge whales from that gear, particularly the Northern Atlantic right whales, because they are highly endangered. There's only a few hundred of them left. So it's really important to keep each one of them safe. And sea turtles oftentimes get caught up in ghost gear as well. Dolphins are pretty smart, and they can actually maneuver pretty well around nets. And they typically won't get caught up in ghost gear, but it is a risk for sure.
So Peyton, who's 10, asks, how much can dolphins weigh?
Hey, Peyton. You want to answer that?
Sure. So thank you for your question, Peyton. So dolphins obviously can get pretty large, and people actually, I think, sometimes underestimate how large they can get. But just recently, actually last week, we responded to a deceased dolphin that was 8.5 feet long and 500 pounds. So dolphins can get, usually if they're even bigger than that, they can get up to 600 pounds. A lot of the times the dolphins that we see and that we're responding to are between 200 and 500 pounds. So they get very large.
What about manatees?
Now, manatees, on the other hand, are a whole different story. So manatees can actually get up to 2,000 pounds. So 500 pounds for a dolphin is pretty much change when it comes to the weight of a manatee. So we actually will and can, we have specialized equipment that we actually can respond to stranded manatees that can weigh up to 2,000 pounds and sometimes even more than that.
So we have just a couple more questions to wrap this up, and there are more that you may want to go back and respond to afterwards. But getting kind of towards the end of this, Kingston wants to know, can dolphins kill a shark?
I'll let you take that one.
I think it depends on who we're putting against each other. So, something like a nurse shark that doesn't have sharp teeth and isn't maybe the toughest. Yeah, I mean, dolphins are strong. And they have been known to headbutt or ram into sharks, especially to protect their young. Typically, they'll do evasive things and just try and get away from the area if there is a shark there. But I think when push comes to shove, they will fight for their babies. So it's something that is definitely possible. But the bigger the shark, and if it's a tiger shark, there have been documentations of sharks even taking out larger cetaceans too. So I think it depends on what weight category we're talking about and what species, for sure.
And we have a question from a 6-year-old who wants to be a marine biologist. What kind of training, college work did you complete to have this job?
Oh man,
That's a lot. So.
Well, I went to the 30th grade, is what I like to tell people. But I have a bachelor's degree in molecular biology, actually, and then a master's degree in molecular biology, my doctorate in veterinary medicine, and a PhD in virology and infectious disease. So I love school. Clearly, they couldn't get me out of it. And I'm a lifetime learner, so I really like to learn. Not everybody needs to go to all of that schooling. It is really important. There's not a lot that we know, and we're still in the discovery phase of marine mammals in general. They're hard to study because they live out in the water, so they're hard to access. So you definitely can. Mackenzie has a master's degree, and the reason why she knows so much about bones is because she went around for her master's degree and looked at bones in museum specimens of different cetaceans to understand the conspecific aggressions between different dolphins. Right? Do you want to talk more about it?
She did. That's exactly it.
But Mackenzie, so I'm a veterinarian and also have a PhD, and so a lot of my work is directly related to the health and the medicine part of it. Mackenzie is a marine biologist, straight up, and she has a more
population,
yeah,
bigger.
Exactly.
Bigger, yeah. So
We'll talk about that.
For marine biologists specifically, so a lot of times our training is going to be more broad. So whereas Dr. Deming is going to be very focused on the medicine side and, how she can help fix and help save and the anatomy and physiology and that sort of thing, marine biologists, we have a pretty expansive training when it comes to knowing a variety of species, being able to identify those species, being able to know the ecology and the biology of where those animals live, what they eat, who they interact with, how they interact. So much more of a more broad kind of training. So
a lot of our viewers won't know what those degree levels mean. So she mentioned that you have a master's degree, but that probably follows a bachelor's degree.
Yes,
so you
yes.
did a 4-year degree, college degree.
Yes,
to get
yep.
your bachelor's degree.
Yes.
And went back to college for another couple of
And
years
then
for a master's
yes,
degree.
2 years. Yes, with a research project. That's exactly right. Yes, and there's programs all over. The program that I went to was in North Carolina, so a lot of different places have marine science. There's more. You can go the oceanography route too, where there's more of kind of the physical oceanography and the chemical oceanography. So you're actually finding out more about the places these animals live, versus the animals themselves. So, and then you can go the route that Dr. Deming went to, which is more of the virology side of things. So learning more about the health of the population and how viruses spread, and that sort of thing when it comes to animal health. So there's all different ways that you can be a marine biologist. So marine biologists kind of cover a wide variety of career paths and education levels and how many years you go to school.
And I'll just follow up on that really quickly. Just because you don't go to school specifically to be a marine biologist, we rely on people in all kinds of fields to be able to do the things that we do. So if you're an engineer, if you're in government, if you're a lawyer and want to do environmental law, there's a lot of ways that you can help and come up with innovations that can help protect the environment, to help protect marine mammals, and to do your part in a way where you're not necessarily working directly with the animals, but you're being an advocate and you're building a career around something that can really help both the environment and wildlife. So definitely consider that. If you don't want to be a marine biologist, it doesn't mean you can't help in other ways. And we rely on collaborating with people in all kinds of fields to kind of put pictures together, and I like to surround myself with people that are a lot smarter than me in areas that I know nothing about, so we can really come together and come up with the best answers possible to help protect the world and these animals that I love so much.
And the final most important question that we have on here is, if you see a stranded dolphin or a manatee, what number do we call?
Yes, I will pass that to Mackenzie.
Yes, what a great question. So we actually have this lovely handout. So there are a variety of ways to report your manatee sightings. So you can actually call this phone number. So it's 1-866-493-5803. You can report online. You can send an email. We also have Facebook pages. And if you see a sick, injured, or deceased dolphin, or marine mammal at all, and so whale, dolphin, or manatee, you can call 1-877-WHALE-HELP.
Yeah, and we also have a Facebook page, so if you look for the Alabama Marine Mammal Stranding Network Facebook page or the Manatee Sighting Network Facebook page, if you like that, that's a great way to be able to access those phone numbers, because people may not necessarily remember them when they're out on a beach coming across an animal, but then you can just pull out your phone. And that also goes to say a couple things. Number one, if you come across an injured dolphin or manatee or whale that is up on the beach, so it's sick but it's still alive and up on the beach, a lot of people will think the first thing to do is to push that animal back into the ocean, but actually that is not what you want to do. Those animals come up on the beach because they're very sick, so the best thing you can do is to leave the animal where it's at and call us immediately, and we will send a team out. We'll show up, sirens blazing, to come out and help that animal the best that we can. So number one, never push a marine mammal back into the water if it has elected to strand itself on the beach. They do breathe air, and they probably have done that because they're really tired, but they need to continue to breathe. So putting themselves on the beach helps them do that. And then we'll come out and help them. And then if you see an animal that's free swimming and is entangled, call us, take a GPS point immediately so we can know what area we need to go back to and look for that animal. And taking pictures, even if you come across a deceased or alive, injured, or unhealthy marine mammal that's in distress, pictures are worth 1,000 words. So it's really helpful to us to have you send us pictures of animals that are in distress or even deceased animals, so we can understand what we're going to get into when we go out and respond. So like Mackenzie said, we could be responding to an adorable 30-pound baby dolphin, or we could be responding to a 2,000-pound manatee. So by you guys taking pictures and communicating that stuff to us before we even leave this awesome building that we have, we know what equipment to grab so we can appropriately respond to that animal the best way possible. So 1-877-WHALE-HELP is the best number for sure to get a hold of us.
Put that in the comments as well.
Perfect.
Great. Fantastic.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming to visit. Mendel, do you want to sign us out?
Thanks for joining us. We have our Boardwalk Talks on the first and third Wednesdays of the month, and as long as the estuarium is closed to the public, we will be bringing these to you virtually. So we hope to see you next time.